we have people from all around the world, and so in the interest of time with the time zones, we're gonna get started right away. And I have all of your pictures up on the slides with your names, so we can just go around and do introductions in that order, if that's all right.
Perfect.
So Renee, you want to start us off?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I am Renee Sterling. I graduated from the University of Florida Fisher School of Accounting in 2005. I know I still look like I'm 21, just kidding. But I have been living in London since 2008. I am currently a vice president or an executive director at Goldman Sachs, and I work in the finance division in regulatory reporting.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mateo Galvis. I'm a senior business development consultant at Google. So essentially, I'm doing advertising sales across some of the largest new clients in the UK. And then I have been at Google for 3 years and graduated from UF with my bachelor's and my master's in 2017.
Hi, I'm Allison. I am based here in Utrecht, Netherlands, which is about 30 minutes outside of Amsterdam. And I attended UF and actually got my degree in sociology, although I was heavily involved with the business school as well. And then I actually got my master's degree in the UK in Southampton. I got my marketing management degree. And I've been here in the Netherlands for the last 2 years, but been abroad for the last almost 6 now. So.
Hi, I'm Steffen. I graduated from UF with a bachelor's in 2004 and also a master's in international business in 2005. I'm a German national, so I've worked in Germany most of my life, but I've been in Istanbul since 2017. And in Istanbul, I'm with a listed building materials company, and I'm an executive board member and the CFO of the company.
Great, thank you guys. Okay, so I guess we're gonna just jump right into the questions that we have prepared for the panelists, and then we can just save any questions from the audience for the end, and then you can feel free to ask those. So we're gonna start off with, what was the process of finding a job abroad, and what was successful and what failed? And we can go in the same order that we did the introductions, if that's okay.
Sure. So I guess just to give background, before I joined Goldman Sachs in London, I was working for Deloitte. That's where I qualified as an accountant, and I was an external auditor. I always had that bug that I wanted international experience. So very early on in my career, I was very vocal about that. But at the time, Deloitte had an exchange program where basically one person from an international office could come to your office, and in exchange, you would go to that person's office. However, you had to be at the minimum a manager, which took at least 5 years. But one thing I can say was I continued to be vocal and determined and said, I really, really want to work abroad. And bless Deloitte, Deloitte did give me an opportunity to work in DC. I was based in Atlanta, and that just sparked my desire even more, because I was like, wow, okay, thank you for Washington, DC, but I still want to work abroad. So I heard about an opportunity through friends, which is why network is very important. One of my friends told me about a fellowship that Goldman Sachs was offering where you get to work for a year, and depending on performance and need, you can get a permanent offer. So that's basically how I came across. So the good thing was, even though I wasn't able to get that with my current employer, Deloitte, at the time, I just kept on persevering and putting it out in the universe and reaching out to my network. And so what was successful is I ultimately found the opportunity to apply, and that's how I got to London.
Awesome. Yeah, a bit like Steffen, I'm a European national as well. So that's something worth noting, is that I have French citizenship. And what I had was that I was actually a dependent on what's called an E2 visa under my parents, essentially meaning that in the US, I actually had to have my own work status, and it was easier for me to move to Europe. And so I decided I was going to do that early on in my college career. In 2016, I interned in France. Actually, then 2017, I interned in sales with Gartner in the UK, about 40 minutes outside of London. And so that did build my resume in the sense that when I was sending applications from some kid from Florida to a lot of these companies that were in Europe, they saw that I had already built a kind of track record in terms of working and living in Europe. So I think that that was quite helpful. And then I did do a lot of networking. I didn't know a ton of people as it was, but I really organized my LinkedIn outreach, went after a ton of recruiters all over the place. And while some of the applications, I actually heard back just to submitting the application, which I was pretty surprised about. Google specifically, I reached out to a recruiter that didn't recruit for the roles that I was even going for, but she simply essentially decided to refer me on to the correct person and take it from there. And so it really was through a single LinkedIn message that they heard me out, asked me to send my resume over, and kind of kicked off the application from there. I hadn't even actually applied yet. So yeah, no, LinkedIn is a good tool for that.
I think we're seeing a bit of a theme, but much like the others, I also tried to build up my international experience from the moment I decided I wanted to maybe live abroad one day. So, you know, I did study abroad programs in London with the business school when I was doing my undergraduate. I went abroad to get my master's degree as well in the UK. So I think that past international experience also really helps when you're looking for an international type of job. But for me specifically, I moved from the UK to the Netherlands, so not necessarily from the US, but I had to do a lot of research. And what I found in that research was I had to kind of adjust my resume a little bit as well. What I find is that some European countries are just a little bit more direct with how they send information across. So your birthday will probably be on your resume, your marital status, your nationality, a lot more information that maybe we don't put on our resumes in the US, maybe even a picture as well. That's quite common for your resumes in Europe. So I definitely had to go and adjust my resume as well as I also worked with recruiters. I worked with recruiters more for the job in the Netherlands than I did for in the UK and the US. So I found that it was just the culture here, but also I definitely recommend doing your research on the job market. You know, here in the Netherlands, it is quite competitive depending on if I'm in marketing and sales. So it is quite competitive in my industry. So it does depend on what you're going for. But Amsterdam is quite an international hub, especially for tech companies. So usually a lot of job opportunities there. So definitely do your research, adjust and network and speak to those recruiters.
Yeah, my recommendation would also be, I mean, one of the key things that I looked at when I chose my company was, I mean, where is the company present? Is it an international company? In which countries is the company present? So I started working with a company called Heidelberg Cement. It's a global building materials producer. They have a presence in 60 countries. So I definitely knew the company's international enough. So that was one of the ideas. And then same as some of my colleagues, I mean, I always voiced my interest to work in different countries. It does help to get a certain level of seniority, I would say, because usually if you're fairly far down the food chain, they won't send you to a foreign country just because it's too much effort to send a lower ranked person to a foreign country, because it's also quite a financial commitment for the company typically. So I would say definitely, I mean, whichever company you join, look, where do they operate, and where could they potentially be sending people. So it's one of the things I did. And I didn't specifically now set out to be in Turkey, to be honest. I mean, but definitely there was a host of countries that I would have been interested to go to. And it also depended for me, it also depended quite a bit on the role itself.
Interesting. Yeah, I think it's great to note how LinkedIn is such a great tool to connect with people all around the world. I mean, that's exactly how I connected with all of our panelists today. So definitely a good one. So what were the costs of moving abroad for you, whether it be financial, social, emotional, mental? If you guys could talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I think for me, fortunately, because I went through a very formal, established program, everything was taken care of, my moving costs, my visa, so I was sponsored at the time, as well as I had temporary housing. So literally I had like a relocation agent who helped me from start to finish. So on that side, I can't really say anything on that. But I think at the time, if I'm perfectly honest, I joined Goldman Sachs in 2008 at the peak of the financial crisis. So emotionally, I was like, what did I just do? I left Deloitte. I was in good standing, had already been promoted at Deloitte. My partner really liked me at Deloitte. And I had a client that was in the process of doing an initial public offering. And so going public. And the partner at Deloitte was like, are you sure this is what you want to do? So I did take a gamble because literally the whole financial industry was about to collapse. So that was a bit stressful, but at the same time, I felt like in life, you gotta take a chance and roll with it. And I wanted to have no regrets. I'd rather have a regret saying I tried than a regret of not trying. So that, to me, to be honest, was the emotional side. And also just being far away from family. I'm my mom's only child and we're extremely close. But thankfully with technology, social media, FaceTime, you know, that's not something you really have to worry about anymore, unless it's a pandemic and traveling is halted like we are today.
Just kind of going through them from a financial perspective, it'd be similar to Renee in the sense that because I had the job offer before moving, kind of moving costs were something that was covered within that. And so that was really useful. The only thing was once you arrive there, you do need to kind of open a bank account, a European bank account, and you know you need a deposit for your apartment that you're getting kind of right away, and you don't even have any euros. And so it was a bit awkward kind of transferring some dollars over and doing some things like that in the beginning. From a kind of social emotional perspective, part of me was extremely excited to move to a city that had not a single person that I knew, just because it's not that often that you have a completely blank slate, I think, to just kind of start over and making all these new friends and kind of, opening up your world in that way. But I did have my girlfriend at the time who was actually still at the University of Florida and had a year left. And so it was probably, an hour, 2 hours a day on WhatsApp, video calls and things like, so that was something that was pretty tough, being away from her for quite a long time. And then being away from my entire family as well, that were in the States. And so it was tough because I felt like half of my life was in Ireland and the other half of my life was in the States, and that I didn't quite belong in either of them. But yeah, over time, honestly, I've really grown to get used to it. I actually got married and my wife is with me now in Ireland, which obviously from a kind of emotional and social support is huge as well, especially during COVID. So I think, once you start building friends and feeling like you have roots somewhere, it's nice. But when you feel like you're kind of floating, it can be a bit hard in the beginning.
Yeah, well, my journey was a little bit different. I moved to the Netherlands without a job. Actually, I took a big leap, like Renee was saying, you don't know unless you try. So my visa in the UK was ending. My boyfriend and I moved to the UK. I studied. I fell in love also. My boyfriend and I, we were not ready to be apart. So we actually moved to the Netherlands. They had some good opportunities for me in my career and visa-wise. So yeah, we moved here with very little. We didn't have job offers, anything like that. So the financial aspect, yeah, you got to save up. We were able to rent an Airbnb for a couple weeks while we looked for an apartment. The Netherlands is quite strict in how you move here. You have to, register, get a BSN number, which is basically your social security number, and then you can get a job, and then you can apply for a bank account. So you have to have a place to live before you can apply for that other stuff. So it was the financial and kind of social aspects of getting all of that set up. That was a bit difficult. Additionally, I don't speak very much Dutch. So yeah, the language barrier as well, it can be difficult, especially when you're setting up bank accounts and signing contracts in Dutch. And, I was going to my colleagues being like, am I signing my life away? Please check this contract to make sure that I understand it. Also, Google Translate is my life. So that also helped. And like the other said, yeah, the emotional, mental side of things, it's hard being away from family. I haven't hugged my parents in 15 months now, which is the longest I've ever gone. So it's definitely a struggle, and I think during COVID we're all experiencing that. So it's an extraordinary time. But yeah, I mentioned I'll be going home in a few days, so hopefully I can see my family again.
For me, moving abroad was also quite easy because it was covered by the company as well. I had a relocation agent in Turkey as well. Since I don't speak any Turkish, that's really essential. I cannot imagine doing this on my own. So that was really essential because, let's say, the level of English is not that high in Turkey. So I would really struggle without a relocation agent, clearly. So financial wasn't a problem. Social and emotional. Of course, I didn't know anyone in Istanbul, but I took my family with me. I'm married, I have 2 kids, so that was quite okay. And there's also a host of compounds in Istanbul with expats, so it is fairly easy to get to know people that are in a similar situation. So that's actually, it's not bad. I mean, the most overwhelming thing maybe is I lived in a town similar to the size of Gainesville in Germany, and then moving from a town basically to a city with 15 million people. That was probably the biggest change. And it's a pretty crazy city. Exciting, but pretty crazy. I mean, traffic is crazy. I mean, you'll never be alone in Istanbul. That's clear. So that was maybe the biggest change. And now with COVID, I mean, I have the same experience as everyone else. I mean, I haven't been able to see family at all because you can't really leave the country. So that's the toughest part. But I'd say the first 3 years when I could still travel freely, that wasn't a big issue.
Great, thank you guys for sharing about that. So what was your transition like from life in the US to life abroad? And then if your situation, if you would rather explain, you know, from Germany to Turkey, that also would be very interesting to hear about. So if you guys could just kind of give us some insights on the cultural differences between the places that you've lived, that would be great.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I have family who live in England. Background, my parents are Jamaican, so there is a strong Caribbean presence in the UK. But I guess I was just kind of naive because I went to London when I was like a teenager. And so I just had in my head, I'm like, oh, we speak English, right? But then you learn that there's differences such as football versus soccer, or schedule versus schedule, or toilet. Like when I remember I went to a bar and I was like, where's the bathroom? They're like, there is no room for a bath, it's toilet. So just making sure you kind of acclimate to the lingo, number one. I guess number two was when I moved in 2008, the pound was ridiculously strong. It was like $2 for £1. So I had to teach myself to stop converting because I used to be like $2 for an apple, because it was £1. And then also just the fact that, you know, the pound was so strong and food portions were significantly smaller to what I was accustomed to in America. So in my head, just trying to adjust psychologically with I'm paying double but getting half. That was another thing. But look, I think, you know, I had to learn about like communication, right? Like as an American Caribbean background, we're just more direct. In the UK, it's a bit passive. My husband is British. I always joke with him and say what you mean and mean what you say. So just learning how to make sure you're asking the right questions to extract the information that you need. But I think it's really cool. Like you learn, but that's the beauty of living abroad as well as someone visiting your native country. It's all about just learning. But it was just very funny to think like, oh, well, we both speak English, but then you realize there are differences in the words that you use.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. In our offices, we have loads of nationalities represented across the Middle East, across some parts of Africa, and across all of Europe as well. And then there's always some Americans as well. So you're exposed to a massive melting pot of so many different cultures, so many different languages, ways of life, upbringings that all kind of come together in one place. And so it's been fascinating. I've really, really enjoyed having that. I myself was born in Colombia. My mother's French. I was already exposed to culture and different cultures quite a bit growing up. But then you realize that there's so much more out there. And so that's something that's really interesting to note. I think that you need to kind of have that in mind as you approach things like communication. It's more important than ever to understand people's communication styles and upbringings. But the last thing I'd say on that is, at the same time, you know, some of my best friends, one of them's from Hungary, another one is from Belgium. You're more similar than you are different in a lot of ways. And, you know, I've connected deeper with some people from places that I've never been to or never seen than some of the people back home. So it's really interesting.
I have to agree there on the communication style. I think that is the most distinctive thing about the Dutch. They are very opinionated and direct people. I once mentioned that my boyfriend was my partner. I used the word partner. I thought it was a bit more, you know, a nicer term. And then somebody directly asked me if I was a lesbian, and I was like, well, no. But it was just very in your face. They just say what they think. So it's, especially in the workplace and when you're out and about, it's something to get used to. They also really love to stare. And I moved here from the UK, where they didn't really like to make eye contact on the tube. So like to be stared at so much is quite, my boyfriend and I are always like, is there something on our face? You know, something happening? And they are, I think it goes back to their like Calvinist roots, but everybody keeps their drapes open. So you walk down the street and you can see into everyone's house. You can see what they're having for dinner. It's just very open. And I think that's why, you know, maybe they stare so much as well. So it's a lot of cultural differences there socially to get used to. But my other thing is food. The Dutch are not known for their food as well. They fry a lot of things. They also like to mash it up like mashed potatoes, but they call it stamppot. To be fair, the food here is just horrible. And also with the language barrier, I go into the grocery store and I have to, like, any new recipe I want to try, I have to translate everything and then take pictures on the website and then take it to the grocery store so that I can match the branding. And so, without the language, I know a lot of foods now in Dutch, but when it was just starting off, it was quite difficult to get used to. So that's it for me.
Yeah, Turkey is also quite different, I would say, both from Germany and from the US. Actually, on the opposite end for many of the things, it's a very indirect culture, I have to say. So giving feedback to your employees is just non-existent. I mean, negative feedback just doesn't exist. That's, I would say, one of the key differences. And another thing in terms of the working culture also, I mean, people don't like to plan at all, basically, because things change so frequently in Turkey. To give an example, I mean, during my time here, we've had, I mean, inflation rates go from anywhere from 8% to 27%. I mean, within a year. So things change so frequently. Laws change very frequently. So people just don't make plans, but also means it's not common to plan. So people don't have any practice in planning. So if you suggest being more structured or to make a plan, people just look at you as, this guy's crazy. I mean, what's he talking about? What do I know what I'm going to do in 2 days? So that was definitely an adjustment, but people are very, let's say, very flexible. I mean, they're very good at improvising. So that's definitely a positive thing in Turkey. So definitely very different, but very exciting. Also, let's say the population's very young. So many of my co-workers are very young. So that's also a nice thing, I have to say.
Interesting. So on the same note, actually, I guess if you guys already kind of touched on the differences in the work culture specifically, but if there are any other ones that you didn't already mention, or if you could talk about how you adapted to the different work culture, if you guys could share about that, that'd be great.
I think it depends on the industry that you're in and the culture of the company. So for me, like, I joined an American company that also has presence in the UK. So I also interacted a lot with my American colleagues, but similarly to Mateo's point earlier, that you are working with people from all walks of life. So I think the main thing for me was just to recognize that my way isn't necessarily the right way, it's just a way. And just understanding how to communicate with impact and how to just kind of give everyone a voice and just to understand people's working style. Definitely one thing that just stands out, from a work-life balance. For example, I'm currently on maternity leave. In the UK, you can take up to a year off. In America, still room for improvement. So that's just one example. Another example is just the number of vacation days. Also just networking. I think in the US, we have a lot more formal networking events, but like in the UK, it's more of a pub culture and you kind of do a lot of networking at the pub. And that's how you get more deals and insights. So it's just trying to understand the lay of the land and how things go. There's no right or wrong way. It's just how things work in a specific area. But, I've only worked for an American company, so I kind of still feel like I have that work hard mindset, but I'm also lucky to be in Europe where I get loads of vacation days and the luxury to take a very long maternity leave.
We definitely need to catch up on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to mention the same in the sense that working for an American company, a lot of the culture is built around that. And a lot of, the things that Google in the US is doing obviously kind of expands to how they operate internationally. And so that's definitely something that obviously makes it have a lesser difference than if you go to a local company. I think you'd see wider differences. On the other hand, around the expectations on work-life balance, it's not as easy for me to say simply because I haven't worked in the US long-term, but from a lot of my friends and a lot of the things that I understand, it is more relaxed, or they at least value it more. Just Europe, I find people just tend to move slower. Even the people who are often joining as kind of graduates and things, often they're 26, 27 years old. They like, extending their education for longer, maybe taking gap years or otherwise working for a year somewhere before going back to school. And so overall, they just like to take their time a little bit more. They take their vacation more seriously. So in some ways, I'd say you do get the sense with some people that really they're working to live, not living to work. Whereas in the US, it's a very work-driven culture. And so it's quite nice. I mean, in terms of things like vacation days, which we already have a lot of, in my team, they're always asking, when are you all taking vacation? Like, we have too many days left over. Like, you guys need to take time off. And so that's, always been really nice.
Yeah, I touched on a little bit of this when I was talking about the Dutch directness. So that was definitely something to get used to in the work environment. But yeah, once you know the culture, it's quite easy to communicate. But yeah, I think the work-life balance here in the Netherlands is really, really good, better than I've experienced anywhere else. And to give you an example, yeah, Corona has been difficult for me and for a lot of us, and it has given me some struggles in my work. And so today I was talking to my boss, and he was like, I had my performance evaluation actually today, and he said, we're so happy with your results, but we want you to be happy. He's like, if you need extra time off, if you need to take some sick days, he was really super supportive and encouraging. And I just sat there in a bit of awe, because I was like, I've just never had that kind of conversation with a boss in America. And not saying that there's a right and a wrong to it, but definitely I feel a lot more supported and encouraged in that work-life balance here in the Netherlands.
Work-life.
Oh, I'm sorry. Do you mind if I ask specifically, Steffen, from the management role, going from Germany to Turkey, when you mentioned how, there's no like negative feedback given. So were you specifically trained to be in a management role in a different culture, or was it one of those things where you kind of just had to learn from trial and error of how to deal with subordinates in a different culture?
I did have a 2-day training in Germany before I moved to Turkey by a Turkish German national who sort of explained the most important aspects to me. But still, I would say, I mean, nothing can prepare you like the real thing. So although I had the training, I mean, okay, it did help me a bit, but it was trial and error, more or less, I would say, in the role. But let's say that the relationship between a worker and his or her boss is in many senses a lot closer than it would be both in the US or in Germany. So you actually, it's expected from you that you get quite involved in the private life of your employees. You help them, or something I had to get used to, for example, if let's say your grandfather or your grandmother passes away, then that's announced in the company. I mean, and you'd be expected to, and it's posted with the cell phone number of the person. So you'd be expected to call them and share your condolences. So quite different, I have to say.
That's very interesting. Okay. So what challenges have you faced in your career abroad, and how did you overcome them?
I'll be perfectly honest. I think for me is probably just my approach. Again, like I was a very direct person. I still am. What you see is what you get. But what I learned is that communication is an art and not a science. And so, you know, managing people who are younger than me, I realized, you know, emotional intelligence is very important. Having empathy, having compassion. You get a lot more when you treat people like people as opposed to focusing on the deliverables. And I think, yeah, like when I was younger, I was very much focusing on just excelling and getting stuff done. But now that I'm, you know, more seasoned, more senior, I realize that you get more by building bridges. And that doesn't mean, you know, people can walk all over you, right? But it's just understanding that people have different motives and triggers. So it's very important to really understand the people who you're working with. Also, you know, working in banking, it's a very stressful industry. I mean, we were whacked with the 2008 financial crisis. And then in Europe, we had the European sovereign crisis. And then, you know, just as we think we're doing well, you know, with our regulators for various reasons, you know, things just happen. And so, you know, mental health is real. And so I think I learned to take a step back and, you know, focus on my mental health. And I'm really happy that more recently companies are more vocal about mental health and how prevalent it is. And so I've trained to become a mental health first aider for a couple of reasons. You know, it impacted me personally, as well as the fact that culturally, again, you know, being of Jamaican heritage, it's still taboo. And I felt like it was very important for people who report to me or who are my peers can see someone who looks like them, who they can talk to and be directed to the best resources of the mental health first aid. So I think a lot of the things that were done in 2008, where it's all about FaceTime, I think we realized that people are people. And I think the pandemic has definitely brought more humility and humanity to people. So hopefully that will continue.
Yeah, interesting thing about Google in Dublin is that for a lot of people, it's almost an extension of university life in the sense that you move to a new place where you don't know a lot of people, and then you have this really big kind of community through work just because you eat in the office, you often hang out in the office, you hang out in pubs around the office, you live, you know, 10 minutes walk away for a lot of people. Is what it generally tends to be. And everyone's quite young and, you know, social. And so the challenge that I faced and that a lot of people face going into that is the fact that essentially your entire life eventually revolves around work, even if it's just your friends that happen to be from work. Everything that you do is work because your family's not there, your childhood friends aren't there, and your former communities aren't there, and work is an obvious place to kind of start building that. And so I find, yeah, a lot of people have the challenge of feeling like, you know, there's more to their life than work. And so some of the things that I did in Dublin to kind of overcome that is that I joined a church. I was part of a church already in the United States. And so went around and found one in Dublin as well. I joined a tennis club, again, completely unrelated to work. After my first year of living literally a 2 minutes walk away from work, I moved further as well. And then, did some other things like not taking my laptop home on the weekend, kind of the classic things to detach from work more and kind of separate your life to make sure that that's not taking over too much. And I know for a fact, if I wouldn't have done that at the time that I did, I would have definitely burned out.
Yeah, I think I can echo some of the mental health and making sure that you disconnect. I had very similar experiences to Mateo. When you move, you form your community with your work people, and it's pretty important to kind of make sure there's that separation. But also for me, while I only knew my work people, a lot of people that I work with are from completely different cultures. So, I'm working with Italians, with French, Germans, British, Spanish. So we're all from different backgrounds. And so, they're the only people I speak to every day. So I really have to learn to get along with them. And everyone's work ethic is quite different. So, from an American background, I just kind of work my butt off, and that's, what I feel like is success. Whereas other people feel like if they have more time for leisure and get their work done, then that's maybe more of a sign of success. So it's really, getting used to how all these people are working, since we're spending so much time with them as well. And also the language barriers for me was always a challenge. While my office is an English speaking office, we conduct all of our meetings in English. There's always conversations in Italian or Spanish or Dutch in the office as well. And it can be hard to feel included. And, I one of my first days in my job, they were having a conversation in Dutch, and one of my colleagues was like, "Hey, can we speak out in English so that Allison can participate?" So you have to kind of just be assertive sometimes and be like, "Hey guys, what are we talking about?" If you really want to, because not everybody is going to think like, "Hey, Allison isn't, understand Dutch yet." So, I had to learn to also be a bit assertive myself and make friends and be outgoing and kind of say what I need as well. So.
I can definitely echo what Allison said. So in my company, it's a really, really Turkish company, I have to say. I was the only foreigner in the entire company at the beginning. Now, in the meantime, I have a French colleague, so I'm not the only one. But especially in the beginning, that was very interesting. I got very immersed into the culture, and I had a similar experience that in meetings, I mean, sometimes after 5 minutes or so, they'd switch from English to Turkish. And I wouldn't understand anything. I'd just sit there for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. They'd still go on in Turkish. And I had to learn the same thing and say, "Hey guys, I mean, can we please switch back into English? I mean, I'd like to be part of the discussion." So that was definitely one of the toughest things. And still, I mean, much of the, let's say, email communication, or whether it be contracts or whatever, everything's in Turkish. So, and I'm supposed to sign this now, and I'm supposed to judge this, but all the documentation, everything's in Turkish. So, I mean, how am I going to judge this, if it's all in Turkish? So then I had to start request everything be translated, otherwise I'm not going to sign it, and you have to explain it to me. And so that was definitely one of the challenges. I mean, definitely definitely hard if you don't speak the language. I mean, don't underestimate the challenges, I would say.
Interesting. Okay, so we're gonna go, this is our last formal question, then we'll just open up questions from any participants. I know Steffen and Mateo probably didn't go through the visa process. I don't know if you did you mention you were already sponsored, Renee, with Goldman Sachs?
Yes, I was sponsored, but I then upgraded my visa.
Okay, so maybe if Renee and Allison could talk more about the visa process, that'd be great.
Yeah, so when I joined, so Goldman sponsored me under a tier 2 visa, which meant that your visa was tied to your employment. But given the uncertainty that was going on at the time, that made me nervous. And I met, and he's now my husband, a British guy, but obviously I didn't want a shotgun wedding just so that I can stay in the UK in case Goldman, because of the difficulties of the financial crisis, made me redundant. So I, within 18 months, got a tier 1 visa, which was then for highly skilled. people. So it wasn't tied to your employment. It was based on, your earnings, having a certain amount of assets and educational background. So the fact that I had a master's, qualified accountant, et cetera, I was able to get the tier 1 visa. So I did that because of security, to know that I could stay in the UK in the event with what was going on with banking that I lost my job. Then after 5 years, once you're in the UK for 5 years, you're eligible for permanent residency. So then I got permanent residency, which meant I no longer needed a visa. Then after a year of permanent residency, you're able to apply for citizenship. So now I maintain dual citizenship in the US and the UK.
Yeah, a little bit of background. I was originally, just like Renee, I was on a tier 2 visa in the UK. So I was sponsored by a company. I had quit my job and decided, my boyfriend and I, we decided to move. And so for me, it was a little bit easier just because of the close proximity. Also, we're American, so we didn't have to do any like special visa. So I was able to move before I even got a visa decision to the Netherlands. So I think as a tourist, you can stay in the Netherlands up to 90 days. So you could actually come here and start a visa process at that time. So the first visa that I was on when I moved to the Netherlands was called the Orientation Year Visa. You can get this if you have received a master's or PhD from a top 200 university in the world. If you're wondering if UF is on that list, it definitely is. So you can get a visa for 1 year, and you can come and work here and do whatever you want. Basically, it's all based on your education level. So I had to, get my diploma, get everything certified. There's a service here in the Netherlands that will certify your diploma. So I was able to move here before my visa decision. I was even able to start working before I got my visa decision as well. So as long as you've applied for your visa, you can go here to the immigration department, get a sticker on your passport, and that allows you to work while you're waiting for your decision. So it's super flexible, really nice process here in the Netherlands, but it is only for 1 year, unfortunately. And I know a lot of people during Corona, that was even more difficult because, that's the last time you have to look for a job. So for me, I was lucky and I did fall in love with a Brit as well. So we moved here before Brexit, and Brexit is a whole other business, but I'm now on a partnership visa. They do unmarried partnership visas here in the Netherlands. So I am now on a partnership visa, which is nice because it allows me not to be tied down by a job. I had done that before in the UK, and I just thought I want security of myself and not be reliant on someone else. So now I can work freely and very flexible. I have a 5-year visa as well. But in case you're wondering, another option, what's super special about the Netherlands was they were one of the first countries to recognize the United States when the United States became its own country from England. So there's a Dutch-American friendship treaty called the DAFT, and you can come here and set up your own business for 4,500 euros. And you can become a consultant. I know a lot of people that are on this visa, they do consulting work for American companies, and you can have some income from the Netherlands as well, but it is very easy as an American to set up a company in the Netherlands. That was my plan C. So I had like A, B, and then my boyfriend. I was like, if that doesn't work out, no, I'm just kidding. There's always quite a few options.
Very interesting. Okay, thank you guys for sharing. So I'm going to open it up to any of our participants who might have any questions for the panelists. Feel free to come off of mute or put the question in the chat. Either works.
I think we actually also had some people raising like their hands. If you wanted to
okay.
Put the raise your hand feature. Yeah, Marcos seems to be the first one. So Marcos, if you want to go ahead and go first.
Yeah. Hey, y'all. My name is Marcos. Allison, you kind of touched on the question I was going to talk about in regards to your plan C, but it seems like most of y'all kind of followed more of a corporate abroad experience. Do any of y'all know if there's kind of room to grow in the entrepreneurial sense when trying to travel abroad, or is that difficult? Is it easy? Is it easier to first get like integrated into the culture and then try to do something like that? Just kind of like, what are your thoughts and experiences on that?
I'm trying to think. So, I mean, I have a couple of friends who basically went the corporate route and then has since left their corporate job to start their own consulting firms. One of my friends, for example, worked for Deloitte Consulting, left London, went back to Detroit, and then decided she wants to like focus on what it's like to be an expat and move to Lisbon, because it was just easier for ability to stay. I think in the UK, you can only, correct me if I'm wrong, Allison, it's only 90 days on your American passport. And I think for her, Portugal was more generous. So she was able to do that. I think when there's a will, there's a way. But you gotta understand, you have to understand like what your time limit can be if you don't have a set visa, or you're not, you know, like, or you don't have a European citizenship, you know, to one of the EU member states. But definitely there's loads of people who've done it. Like I know someone who started being a fitness guru, left her corporate job in Hong Kong and set up in Bali. And now she has over 100,000 followers. So I just think you got to know what your why is, and then go for it and have a plan.
Yeah, just to add to that, it really just depends on the rules of the country you're looking to go to. So like the Dutch-American Friendship Treaty, that's just between the US and the Netherlands. It's not a European thing. So it's just significantly easier to come to the Netherlands and set up your own company than it would be to probably go to, the UK definitely. Or I don't know, maybe even Belgium or Germany. So it would definitely be worth looking into a couple if there's any specific treaties or anything like that with other countries.
We have a question here in the chat that says, with dual citizenship, how does that work with taxes? Do you pay taxes to both countries or only the one you live in?
That's a great question. So as an American, yes, I'm still required to file my US taxes. However, because the UK definitely taxes me more than the US, I don't face double taxation. But yeah, I have to file my taxes as a US citizen. It is a requirement, regardless of whether you owe taxes or not. It's an obligation that you have to fulfill every year. So that's one of the challenging, annoying things as an expat, is that you still have a lot of administrative things that you need to do.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Renee, but it's rather expensive to give up your American citizenship, isn't it? I think you have to pay quite a lot of money to give it up.
Yeah, and also I think like it takes a long time because, you know, because some people who tried to do it, like say you move to Singapore, you move to Dubai, you know, it's like if something were to happen to you, your estate would still be taxed if it falls within a certain number of years. So yeah, if you're like a billionaire, go for it. But you know, if you're an average Joe, like it just comes with the territory.
Next question, or next person who has their hand raised, actually I think is Sydney, if you want to go ahead and go.
Hi, I would like to say thank you so much for coming out and speaking to us. This is giving literally so much information, so I thank you so much right now. But when planning for your future, do you see yourselves going back to your respective home countries? And if so, how do you plan on like planning for your retirement and go about all the technicalities like Social Security in the US, 401ks, things like that, being, you know, an expat?
I can go ahead and take on that. So yeah, because my wife and I both have basically all of our family in the US, we do plan on coming back. It was always planned to be something temporary, though I've absolutely loved Europe. I think Europe's fantastic, and will definitely continue to be going back the rest of my life. So in terms of planning to come back with all those things, I do have like a pension in Europe. And from my understanding, I need to look into this more, that is going to stay essentially in the currency that it's in and kind of with Irish Life, which is the pension provider that I have, until my retirement, after which I can then pull it out. So it's a little bit awkward. It doesn't transfer into a 401k in the US. And so the time at which I'm going to move to the US, I'm going to have to kind of open all that up at that time and then like restart in the US while also having an Irish account that I need to remember that I have, so that I make sure that I can make good use of that. But yeah, then when it comes to Social Security and all those sorts of things, I already have a Social Security on my side. There is some kind of final immigration things that I need to do to get my green card, but from there shouldn't be any problem in terms of finding work in the US. or being able to provide the right kinds of documents so that it's like being employed, as if you're switching companies in the US, not necessarily something where it's international.
I'll quickly add to that. I remember when I moved to London, I told my mom, don't worry, I'll be here for a year. And now it's 12 years later and I'm a citizen. Now that I have a daughter, I selfishly want her to go to University of Florida and pledge the same sorority that I pledged, Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated. So selfishly, the long-term plan is to come back to the US, but in the meantime, London works for my husband and me right now. But I think maybe when she's about to start kindergarten, we'll make that transition.
And if I can, I'll just add to that as well. I think it also depends on where you choose to settle. So yeah, here in the Netherlands, not a lot of places in the world speak Dutch. And so I decided that I didn't want to invest the time to become fluent in Dutch because I didn't plan on staying here for very long. And so, yeah, I mean, if you also choose a country that you know you want to stay to, then you start investing everything from the very beginning. But yeah, my boyfriend and I, we will move back to the US probably when our visa's end here, which is in the next 5 years.
Yeah. Similar for me. I mean, not necessarily go back to the US, but yeah, I don't plan on staying in Turkey for the next 20 years. Also didn't invest that much into learning the language because it's incredibly difficult. So it's also temporary for me. So either I'll go back to Germany or I'll go be an expat in another country. Let's see. So I'm open. In terms of retirement planning, I'm continuing to pay into the German retirement system while I'm abroad. So hopefully that's going to work out well.
Next question, Chrissy, if you want to go ahead and ask.
Hi, so my question basically has to do with learning the language, and I guess you kind of touched on it a little bit, but I lived in Germany for a year, and learning the language is extremely difficult when people are speaking at such a difficult level when I knew so little. And so I assume that even if you knew a little language before you went to a country, learning the technical language of your business would also be difficult. So I was just wondering if your company trained you in that, or you had to take languages on the side. I just was curious about that aspect of your jobs.
I can touch on that a little bit from my personal experience. When I interned in France, even though I spoke French, I didn't speak financial terminology in French, which was the kind of internship that I had. And it was something where they informally helped me, but it was largely on me to learn. And then I have an English friend from the time at which I interned in Gartner who wanted to move because their partner was in Madrid in Spain. And so they essentially managed to be able to change over to Spain, and recently have actually gotten a job in Spanish. And the way that they did that was that they studied on their own, took classes, courses, and also worked with their partner who spoke Spanish to like really grind it out. And so, yeah, I think that there needs to be a really high level of intentionality, an extremely high level of dedication. But in his case, he went from kind of, being from the northern part of England, never needing to know another language, to speaking fluent Spanish, actually with a strong Spanish accent. So it's something that's doable if you want to put the time in.
Yeah, and just to add to that, yeah, my company did provide free Dutch lessons. It's just unfortunate because I do sales to the UK and the US, so I often have I sell software, so I often have product demos at like 9, 10 o'clock at night. So it was hard for me to keep up with the actual classes because of my schedule. But I've lived in the Netherlands now, I guess maybe closer to 2.5 years. And what's really amazing is that I have taken some classes. Of course, I think we've all done Duolingo at some point in our lives as well. I can understand Dutch, but I can't really speak it. And so like something magical has kind of happened, even though I'm speaking English every day at work, that like I can understand things, like somebody comes to the door and delivers something, and like I just can't say anything back to them. So I just go, so, but yeah, it's, even even though I haven't even tried that hard, I absorbed the language. And I will say the first year I was here, yeah, it was super difficult, but it just is become organic now, just like what I can understand.
Last question, Margarita, if you want to go ahead and ask it, and then we have one more in the chat, it looks like.
Thank you. Yes. Love this conversation, of course, like everyone, I think. But my question was more on a personal note. So I have Italian citizenship and American citizenship. And I remember just my upbringing, my parents instilled in me that it's such, I'm so lucky to have this opportunity. So I've always had the travel bug of wanting to live in different countries. And my question is more, what are the top things to consider when you're picking what country you want to live in? Because I mean, my first input would be go visit the country, but it's so different just, traveling to a place and living there. So what are some insight that you can share on that?
So I think for me, it's about going to a country where your industry is quite prominent. So for me, Fannie Mae was my client when I was at Deloitte, and I audited mortgage-backed securities. That then sparked my interest in investment banking. I knew I wanted to work abroad, and London, the city of London, that's the international city of the world when it comes to finance, right? So I think the first thing is for your career, where is that country that's going to help you thrive? And then also for me was access. Like it was so important for me to be in a country where it was very easy for me to travel. Like I love living in London. I can hop on a train. I'm in Paris in 2.5 hours. Now we have a direct train to Amsterdam. I've been to Utrecht as well through Eurostar. So that was just very important. So to me, it's a combination of career, access to travel. It's a bonus if you have friends, like, through the City Fellowship Program. There was a UF alumnus who was already a part of the City Fellowship Program. So it works if you kind of have a network, but that doesn't have to be the binding criterion.
I have some very big advice here. So I, like everyone, had been to Amsterdam, right? Like a million times I'd been to Amsterdam. And let me tell you, I had some great times in Amsterdam, but I didn't really travel the rest of the Netherlands. And so I moved to the Netherlands thinking, oh, it's going to be great. It's going to be like Amsterdam all the time. But yeah, it's really different. So if you do have a country that you are interested in going to, don't just go to big cities. Go and experience the actual culture outside of that, because in the big cities, I often find it's international people. Everybody in Amsterdam speaks English, but not everybody in Den Haag, or well, maybe Den Haag, but in a small. I lived in Marsen, which was like a tiny little village outside of Utrecht. Nobody spoke English there. In fact, we were known as the English couple at the grocery store, right? Because who else would live in Marsen? So I definitely recommend traveling around the country a bit, trying to experience those small villages, the culture, the food, and don't make a mistake like me and just think it'll all be like Amsterdam.
Very good advice. If anybody didn't have anything else to share, we do have like 2 last questions, but hopefully we can kind of combine them. Ali was asking, do you think that any of you were treated any differently, good or bad, being a foreigner, and in this case, obviously like from the United States, and what was like your difficulty moving out of your comfort zone and building your relationship with those locals and stuff, as opposed to like other foreigners?
Right. So it depends. If I was treated differently because I'm American, I think without going into the nuances and the politics, as an American, it's just cool. Like, oh my gosh, you're an American. When people hear your accent, like, that's so cool. Because I was from Miami, Florida, a lot of people were like, why the hell would you leave sunny Miami to move to cold, rainy London? So that was one of those things that people just didn't understand. I mean, let's not be naive. Obviously, with 2020 and recent events, you do have your pockets, as Allison mentioned earlier. Brexit was a thing. I did have some uncomfortable instances. Someone told me that this was England, but at the time I had citizenship and my husband is British. And so, you do have some knuckleheads who unfortunately are stuck in prehistoric times. But largely, I would say that I've been welcomed with open arms. I've met people from all walks of life. I've gone to weddings in Lake Como. I've gone to weddings in Ghana. I've gone on safaris with some amazing friends who I've met over the years. And so in life, unfortunately, what we've seen with 2020, 2021, Megxit, you know, you're just going to have some challenges, but largely speaking, I want to believe that the world is turning for the better.
Yeah, from my side, yeah, first of all, people in Ireland are, I think, some of the most welcoming people in the world. I was extremely surprised by just how welcoming and how kind they were. And that's not just for Americans. I think that's for pretty much everyone that's moving there, which is really nice given the volume of people that do move there for work. However, yeah, you know, Irish people love banter. They kind of love roasting each other, and they'll roast you too. And, you know, in a lot of ways, nothing's off limits in some of the conversations. And so it might be your nationality, it might be what team you support, it might be whatever it is. And so, yeah, in those cases, I think, you know, you need to be open with people in terms of what your boundaries are. I, in those things, tend to, you know, have thick skin. I kind of give it back where appropriate. So I didn't really have a problem with it and kind of went along with it. And I think that, you know, obviously that was kind of part of that integration. And then, you know, you all get a little bit closer that way. Then, yeah, besides that, when it comes to obviously, you know, the US news of what's going on in the US is a lot more prominent in other countries than if you're from a different nationality. And so just because you're from the US or you grew up in the US, people assume it's okay to just always ask any questions they want or talk about any, you know, topics that otherwise you might just not want to cover or come up way too often.
People in Turkey are very hospitable. So I think generally, if anyone's thinking, any foreigner thinking to move to Turkey, I'm sure any foreigner will have a very good experience in Turkey. People are generally very interested, whichever country you come from. So I would say overall it was a very positive experience. The main difficulty was just the language barrier. But other than that, people are very hospitable, very friendly and welcoming.
Those are really pleasant answers. That's so good to hear. The really good response. So thank you guys so much. But I think that's all we have for our Q&A questions. Do you want to wrap it up, Gabby, for us?
Yes. Thank you, everybody, so much for coming. And again, thank you to our panelists. I mean, what is it, 2 a.m. in Turkey at this point?
Midnight.
Yes. Thank you guys so much. We really appreciate you taking the time out, especially at these crazy hours. So the recording will be up on our YouTube page. So if you want to share with friends, definitely feel free. But thank you to all of our alumni. You guys are the best. And I hope everyone has a good rest of their day.
Thanks. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thanks.